There's Charles. We're going to bring him on in right now. It is Charles Power, director of rankings here on On3. Charles, appreciate you making the time, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Working through some travel stuff for these All-Star games. I'm stuck in Myrtle Beach. Supposed to go back to Nashville yesterday, but yeah, working on travel stuff. I guess like everybody is, or a lot of people are now. So, but yeah,
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 yeah. It's a madhouse out there from what I've seen on
yeah,
Twitter. So we'll wish you luck getting where you need to go, man. I know you got a lot coming up, but I've been trying to tell people, Charles, there's nobody that has been higher on the Norris Sellers or earlier on the Norris Sellers, I think, than you. Gamecock fans, I think, that are really paying attention now are watching the film going like, holy cow, like this guy is a stud. So what did you see from Lenorris early on, and what have you seen from him as this big senior year sort of played out?
yeah. So I mean, I've known about Lenorris Sellers for a while. Just kind of being just being from South Carolina and following just the area PD high school football. But yeah, I think I first saw him in person at Clemson's camp in June of 2021. It was the first it was the first actually the first day that prospects were allowed back on college campuses after COVID. So I saw him there. It was really, in hindsight, most of the top quarterbacks in this cycle were there. It's like Arch Manning, Nico Yamaliava, who else was there? Christopher Vizina, who Clemson ended up taking. And then other guys like Jaden Davis. It was like a who's who of quarterbacks really within the Southeast, if not the country. And so that was my first chance to see Lenorris there, and I knew a little bit about him. I thought he looked pretty good. He's a guy who is younger for the class, and I think he was still kind of
Mhm.
developing, but had started a year as a sophomore at South Florence, and I thought he really looked on par with those national prospects, despite having just not quite the recruiting attention that they did just in the camp setting. So, kind of started to track him a little bit as a junior. He got to a really good start as a junior at South Florence prior to the injury. I think he was averaging about 4 touchdowns a game, their first 4 games, and I honestly, to be honest, I think he would have done the same thing as a junior if he had the chance to play. Like he was tracking like that, and he just just unfortunately had that injury. Like I think South Florence, if they wouldn't have won a state title, would have made a deep run in his junior year. So I think it was more of a matter of when, not if, this happened.
Mhm.
In West, like we've talked about, like I think Lenorris is a prospect where the more you learn about him, the more impressive it is. Like he's a guy who you kind of peel back the layers, and you kind of just realize he has all these like positive indicators. Whether it's how good of a student he is, he's really good at soccer. Just the production, the athleticism, and I think really what catches people off guard or maybe surprises people is just how strong his arm is. I know y'all saw him at the 7-on-7 camp over the summer. Um,
Mhm.
and I think, just how young he is, he continued to develop physically. I think he really matured physically over the past, year and a half. He's a guy who obviously doesn't, obviously doesn't skip, time in the weight room. So, yeah, I mean, I think you just him having the opportunity his senior year and um, you just his feel for the game and everything he showed. I think it was just getting that chance to play. We had him ranked as I think the highest 3-star quarterback for really most of the cycle. It was just a matter of just seeing him as a senior and getting more of a sample size. And I had pretty high expectations for him, but I mean, he blew my expectations out of the water. So yeah, I think he's a guy that South Carolina fans should definitely be excited about. And it's interesting too, like, I kind of think in, just from following, South Carolina prospects like from the state over the years, he's as good of a quarterback that I've seen come from South Carolina, as a high school player and prospect, since I've been keeping track of it, which is like, I guess, but like the last 20 years or so. So, yeah. And I think too, I think the question people always ask is like, well, why did he not have all this recruiting attention? Like, why did he not have the Power Five offers? I think that's probably something y'all have had to explain, I'm sure. But that's just the way quarterback recruiting is now. Like they start recruiting these guys when they're in 10th grade. So I think if we were going to reset the board for schools, I think people would be lining up for Lenorris Sellers based on what he did as a senior year. So yeah, I mean, I think, there's Gamecock fans should be very excited by him for sure.
Charles, appreciate you again joining us, man, especially on short notice. So one of the things we got asked earlier was for a decent comp to Lenorris Sellers, college or NFL. I know on his On3 profile, I think Jalen Hurts is listed. Uh,
Mhm.
who do you think, from maybe a couple guys, one guy from a college or NFL standpoint, he maybe favorably compares to?
Yeah, I think the play style and as a high school player reminds me of Jalen Hurts a little bit, just with how he was used, as a runner. A guy's like a thousand plus yard rusher. I think the run style is similar. I actually think Sellers is bigger and has a stronger arm at the same stage as Hurts. Hurts was maybe like a little more like technical, mechanical. Yeah, as a passer. But yeah, I think from a body type perspective, I think he's kind of in that Trey Lance, Deshaun Watson type, guy. Like he's a 6'3". I mean, he's a lot bigger than Deshaun Watson was in high school. Like Deshaun Watson was probably 180, 190. Sellers is probably close to 220. So it'll be interesting to see kind of where he ends up from a size perspective. I've seen people throw out Dak Prescott as well. It's kind of that type. I think he'll probably be around, 6'3", 230 range. He's got a pretty relatively lean build. Like you would look at him, you wouldn't guess this is a 220 pounder, but that's what he weighs on the scale. So, yeah, I think those guys would be kind of the ones that I would throw out there. I think, as from a upside perspective, I think you would maybe go with Watson. From a body type, probably Trey Lance. And I think just as a high school player, it probably reminds me the most of Jalen Hurts.
Charles, you mentioned it a little bit already, but the soccer background here, I think, is one of the more intriguing things
Yeah.
about him. I think probably um, not necessarily the carryover you always see. Like you see a lot of football players that play basketball or do track. Soccer is interesting to me, but I gotta think there's some carryover in just footwork and dexterity and just even conditioning and competitiveness as well. What about his exploits as a soccer player? What does that tell you about him potentially as a quarterback?
Yeah, I think I have not seen too many quarterbacks. We see a lot of multi-sport quarterbacks. I think that's something that's very, um, pretty important in just the high incidence you see with a lot of top quarterbacks. Is just the ability to play in space. I think spatial awareness, whether it's basketball, like depth perception,
Mhm.
movement skills in general. I think quarterback is increasingly an athlete position. You look at quarterbacks who really play well in college football and ultimately the NFL. Like almost all those guys were considered like dual threat quarterbacks coming out. Where really like that's kind of like the new pro style, to be honest. I think you have to have a baseline level of movement skills to play at quarterback at a high level and just escape pressure. So I think that for sure. And I think just like the footwork, you can see the kind of the pace when he runs. Like you can like see in this video, like he's got like he's not necessarily like a long strider, but he has like a really good burst, like initial burst. And I could imagine like that probably is something he picked up or just improved just from dribbling a soccer ball and changing directions, cutting on a dime kind of thing. I think I've never seen video of him playing soccer, but I know he's like a striker. Like he scores a lot of goals. I think he averaged like over a goal and a half a game for his varsity careers. I mean, you can imagine. I mean, this guy, he's probably the best athlete on the field at all times, I would guess. And
Yeah.
he's a 220 pounder. We've all seen high school soccer players. Like a bunch of my friends were high school soccer players. They're kind of like little scrawny guys. I'm sure he's just bodying these soccer players. I would love to see the video of that.
We need
But
to unearth that, man.
yeah, for sure. That would maybe go viral, especially if he kind of has like a big career, like, you know,
Yeah.
like at South Carolina or potentially the NFL. Like that would be something I'm sure that they would show on a broadcast. Somebody needs to get their hands on that for sure. But yeah, I think any of that multi-sport stuff is great. Just I think from competing year round, movement skills, stamina, um, and just like the spatial awareness, because that's so much of quarterback, something you can't really simulate uh outside of 11 on 11 padded game is just how you react and just the quickness in decision making and responding to pressure. And that's one thing too, you can see like on that pump fake right there on the video, like he does a really good job of reacting and making split second decisions. He's not a guy who's gonna just kind of fold when somebody's in his face. And I think that's one thing you have to be really excited about. And I think too, like that, I think he benefited from that playing early in his career at South Florence. Like he was under siege a lot, like initially, like in the first year. So like they were not. South Florence is not a really good team. When Drew Marlowe took over and Sellers was, first, second year playing, I think they might have won like 2 games. And that's one thing too, like that really impressed me about him is, he has like a good coaching staff and there are some good players there, but South Florence had never won a state title, not only in football, but any boy sport before this year. So like, I mean, he's like a historic athlete there and just in Florence in general. So in a lot, and most of that was him. I think one thing when you look at quarterbacks, like it's like, are they like a truck or a trailer? Like he was driving the team. If you watched him play, like everything was centered around him. So yeah, I mean, I think there's so many positive indicators with him, and I think it's one of those deals where the more and more you look at it, probably seems like a lot for fans to process. Like where this guy just kind of came out of nowhere, but I mean it's the senior year, and that's such an important eval point for us. And I think it's really the best indicator of, a quarterback, especially a prospect, but a quarterback's, future success.
Charles, before we let you go, man, I want to move over to one other prospect at least. Vicari Swain out of Georgia is an athlete that you're also much higher on him than the rest of the recruiting industry. Two-way guy, had a big last couple years, junior and senior season. But just tell us, what you like about Swain, and also give us your take. It's been a controversial topic. What position is he best at in the college game?
So Vicari Swain is just extremely explosive. Like I think if I had to just describe him in one word, it would be like twitchy or explosive. I think if you go back and even watch some of like the video from him at the Under Armour camp in Atlanta, like his broad jump that he did in socks was, I think, like 11 feet or something. It was just an absurd, like it was just ridiculous. Like I had to like check the number on it. But and I think that kind of athleticism transfers over to the field. I mean, he's complete playmaker on both sides of the ball. Really good ball skills as a DB. I think that kind of differentiates him a little bit. In addition to the athleticism, is just his, like, he comes down with interceptions. I think the wide receiver skills transfer over really well to DB, and then he's extremely physical too. Like he's a striker. I mean, he's just a physical presence over the middle of the field, closes quickly. I like him the most at DB, whether that's corner or safety. I think that remains to be seen. I just think the upside there to be a difference maker is so high, and I think with defensive back, it's really an athlete position, whereas receiver is more of like a quote unquote skill position. It's a lot more technical with route running. And I think just with his sheer athleticism and then his ball skills, I think at DB stack up on the high end. I think that it just kind of differentiates him a little bit more there. And I think Beamer said that they were going to probably start him at DB this week and just see where it goes. I mean, I think that's probably a good call. Whether that's corner or safety, not sure. I think we haven't ranked as an athlete right now. If I had to rank him as one, I would guess safety. But he's certainly athletic enough to play corner. So that's probably my general take on Vicari Swain. But yeah, I mean, when we were going through like the mid-season, the first senior season update, his film like flashed in a big way. Like I think it's hard to watch it and not think this is like a national prospect. And that's one thing we try to do too with Sellers and Swain. They're good examples. Like Nick Eman-Wari was like this. Like I think we had him as the highest ranked South Carolina signee last year. Like if you went back and just watched the senior video and looked at the production and then kind of supplemented that with just his testing numbers and the size and the length, I think all the things were there. All the signs were there that he was really kind of a unique player in South Carolina's class. So I think those two guys, just going through the commit list are kind of off the top of my head. I think those would be two that you would point to and say these are their arrows pointing up based on what they did as a senior, and they just have a lot of positive indicators for sure.
Yeah, check mark on the Eman-Wari evaluation there.
Yeah, that was the one you watched like a game or two of the season. You're like, okay, like that's an instant hit. So we feel good.
Yeah. It was like literally the 8th play of the season. Guy was out there making plays, and then it was like, all right, he's a starter now. Like there's no there's no rotation here. He's the guy. So yeah, check mark on that one, man. While we got you, is there any? So you already got. I mean, you've set the market on Sellers as far as how high we have him right now, 156 in the country. I'm kind of waiting. One thing I like about On3 is our people are not scared to compare the different rankings, and they have it right there for everybody. We'll see if the rest of the industry catches up on that. Is Sellers at his probably high point for us, for you, or is there any room for him or maybe any of these other guys? Is anybody that comes to mind that could potentially move up in the class for South Carolina? I'm looking again. So the highest ranked guy, highest rated guy is Marquis Anderson, but most of the industry is sort of on the same page with him. It's more Vicari, LaNorris, for the most part. Trevon Ball, I think you're higher on than most. But is there anybody else or that stands out? Or
I think Jalen Kilgore has maybe some room to go up. He didn't have a ton of film when we went through it. I mean, we're in the process of putting our final rankings together. So I don't like to make like rankings promises as a policy generally, but I think he's one that I'm excited to kind of watch when we go through safeties. I think I think we're probably a little lower on him than he will end up, whether that's, as a 4-star or not. I think Sellers, how I would phrase it was, since we've done the last rankings, there's been more on him. Like I think we came out with that one the week before Thanksgiving. So it would have been like their 3rd round playoff game would have been the last one. So he had 3 games since then, the Shrine Bowl. As I've continued to go through more stuff, I would just put it this way. He's not going to go down. Like if he moves, it's going to be going up. And I would imagine he'll go up at least a little, if not more than a little. And I think too, like we'll get to see, his sample size or kind of everything we've got from him is done, but we'll see more quarterbacks as well, over the next week or so and kind of go through the rest of their senior seasons. But man, I mean, it's hard to look at what Sellers did as a senior. I mean, I think he really, to me, probably had the best senior season of any quarterback nationally when you consider the competition level, what he meant to his team, just the stats. I mean, his stats are, I think he had the highest touchdown percentage rate, passing touchdown percentage rate, lowest interception rate. He had the 2nd most touchdowns per game of any quarterback that we looked at, like probably of the top 20. Which really hits kind of all the marks. So it's hard when you stack them up just kind of objectively on paper to not have him, as like a top 150 type. I would imagine too, like I can't speak for everybody else, but I would think that he'll get moved up in the other rankings. Like I would be surprised. I mean, I think he should.
yeah.
But I think he'll move up, continue to move up. And I think, maybe like us putting it out there that we're higher than everybody else probably might attribute to that a little bit too. So
yeah. So sometimes people ask me that very question, like, "Hey, is he going to move up?" And I'm like, in the other rankings, and I'm like,
yeah,
how should I know? But yeah, we shall see, man. Charles, hey, great stuff as always, dude. We appreciate you making the time. Full of knowledge. I don't know if you can see the little chat popping up on your screen as well, but lots of people, Gamecock fans, are thanking you and saying we need to have you on more often. So hopefully we can make that happen. So hey, good luck on the travel.
Yeah.
And hey, say you're in Myrtle Beach. Say what's up to the Doties and the McGonagalls for me while you're down there.
Yeah. Good friends with the McGonagalls for sure.
Hey, but watch out for those McGonagalls now.
For sure.
They have some fun. But
they do. Good people.
Yeah. Awesome. Charles, we appreciate you, man. I'll talk to you soon, okay?
All right. Sounds good. See y'all.